All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this automation hour. So logistics today, all lines will be muted. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community. And we also will have the questions here. So for whatever reason you're having problems getting there, or you just don't feel comfortable throwing that out there on the community, you are more than welcome to throw them into the chat inside of GoToWebinar. The recording will be posted after the session, so look for it on our YouTube channel as well as our website. So the resources, we got the Salesforce Automation Hour Trailblazer community, in addition to our website and YouTube channel. So automationhour.com will give you links to everything that you're looking for and past presentations. All right, so upcoming sessions, we got 2 more for the rest of the year. We're excited for both of those, just like we're excited for today's. And we got Cheryl and Stephanie with some awesome upcoming presentations to show y'all. So make sure you register if you haven't already. Do note that Cheryl's was a reschedule, so if somebody was scheduled previously, you'll need to make sure you schedule it again or register again for it because of the reschedule. And as it says here on the slide, we are looking for people to present for next year. So we've already started reaching out to some people that have put in their use cases. And if you have just a little idea of like thinking about whether you want to do it, or maybe you presented something at a local Dreamin' event somewhere, or you have a new idea that you haven't presented anywhere, like just shoot us a note, either Rakesh, Jen, or myself, or all of us, and just let us know that you're interested. So we want to say thank you to our sponsor, Concrete.io. They've been sponsoring us for the whole time we've had this automation hour. And here are the co-hosts, Jen, Rakesh, and myself. And I'm going to pass it on now to Bryan, who is our speaker for today. So Bryan, I'll pass you presenter.
All right, can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me on today, everybody. Sad Jen couldn't make it, but I'm very happy to have David and Rakesh, obviously. As David stated, my name is Bryan M. James. I'm the core maintenance manager at Map Anything. I got my Salesforce MVP this year in 2018. I'm a co-host on System.debug, and you can follow me on Twitter at usbryan28 and System.debug at System.debug. So, here's the story. Earlier today, I was trying to create a contact when I got a big red error, which was caused by a trigger that inserted accounts. Long story short, I hard-coded rating on every account generated by a contact on that trigger. And here's the thing. Apparently, you're not really supposed to do that. And my boss wasn't really happy when the sales team started griping about the rating thing. And he told me that I had to go back to the drawing board, remove the trigger, and find a more elegant and interactive way to create accounts when creating the contacts. So at first I was kind of at a loss for ideas, but then I remembered that I could make it flow. Something that not too flashy, something that could be put on the home page that creates a contact and then creates an account. Something I didn't actually know how to do. So as usual, I went to trailhead.salesforce.com and found exactly what I was looking for. Guide users through your business processes with Cloudflow Designer. Perfect. I looked at their example and followed their steps, and pretty soon I had created my very first flow. It was nowhere near as hard as I had originally thought it would be, and now I'm pretty much feeling like I'm ready to make my own flow. That'll help my company and streamline our contact creating process. Okay, so what do I need to do first? I need to create a list of my criteria. That should be easy. First, I need a form to create a contact. Then I need to save the contact. After that, I need to give the user a way to choose if they want to create a new account for the contact or choose an existing one and build a form for each of those outcomes. Then I need to update the contact that was created with the new or existing account ID. And finally, I need to test the flow and then activate it. All right, so I got a plan. Now it's time to execute. So off to build the flow, I guess. So let's go over here. Now to find flows, you can simply just type flow in the quick find on your setup menu. Click on flow, and you'll see your list of flows here that you've either activated or, as usual, you can change the view on them. But we're going to go ahead and just create a new flow. I think that's best. Good old Adobe. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we are going to create a new flow here. And once again, the whole purpose of this flow is simply to create a contact, which then goes to the account and creates that. So the first thing that we're going to end up wanting to do here is create our very first screen. And our very first screen is just going to simply be the contact form. So to do the screens, we're just going to drag one right out here. And we need to give it a good solid name. So let's call this contact form. That works for me. Awesome. Next, what we're going to want to do is we're going to start adding a couple of fields here to capture data for our contact. So let's add 3 text boxes out here. One's going to be for our first name of our contact. The next one's going to be for our last name of the contact. And the final one will be for our email address. All right. And since last name is the required field on the contact record, we want to make sure that they actually include that. So we'll go ahead and mark that as required. And that's all there is to the contact form right off the bat. So we'll go ahead and click OK to submit that there. And then the next thing that we need to move to is our actual record create. So to do that, we're just going to grab one of these record creates. And all of the DML stuff's over here in this data section. So any of the DML that you need to do on your data, so if it's create, update, lookup, delete, it's all going to be over there on the left-hand side. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and name our record create, and we're just going to say contact create. And we want to make sure that we're choosing the correct object. So we'll just go ahead and type in contact here. And now what we need to do is actually match our fields. So we need to find out which fields we want to update or create in our contact record. And we need to match them to the screen input fields that our users are going to be filling in. So we'll go ahead, we'll add 3 rows right now. We'll do last name next. We'll do email down here. And then we're going to go back into our screens and get our last name and get our email. All right. Now, once we've created our contact, we want to actually be able to store the record ID from that contact so that we can use it later. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a variable right down here. And we're just going to call that contact record ID. And then we'll click OK. And then OK again. And that should be good for that. And then our next step is to go ahead and determine what happens once our contact form is created. Since the purpose of this flow is to associate an account to our new contact form, we're going to go ahead and create another screen to introduce that here. And then on that screen, we're going to first name it, and we're going to say new or existing account. And then we're going to go to their field settings here, and we're going to add a field, and we want to do radio buttons. And we'll click on that to go into the field settings. And we're going to call this, and this label is going to be whatever is going to show up as next to it as our field label. So let's go ahead and make sure that that's nice and understandable. So create a new account or use existing. And then after that, we want to make sure that we go and set up our choices for our radio button. So we're going to go down here and we're going to create a new source for this. And what we want are actual choices. So we're not going to do the dynamic record or pick list, but we're going to touch on both of those here in a little bit. So what I want to do here is go for this label, and I'm going to make the first one for new accounts, and I want that to be of a text value, but I want the stored value for that to be new. And the reason is that when we do our decision block later on, we're going to need this value. So let's go ahead and save that. And then we're going to create another choice here, and we're going to call this one existing. Plot twist. All right. And same with our stored value. We're going to go ahead and update that as well. So existing, existing, and new on the previous. All right. Once we've done that, that screen's finished, and we can tie that right into our flow. Okay, so before we move on to our what happens after a decision, we actually have to take care of our decision first. So decision blocks are really cool because they kind of act as a if-else statement, where if the value that comes into it is this, we're going to do one thing, and if it's something else, then we're going to do the other. It's just basically making a decision. So in our case, we want to make a decision on whether or not our account exists. And from there, we're going to go down to these outcomes. And by default, you're going to start with an outcome, and then we're going to still want to add an additional one. So let's do this for account exists. And for that, we want to make sure that our resource comes from our screen input, or not our screen input fields, but our screen choice fields for create a new or existing count. And we're going to say if it equals, and then whatever the stored value is of our existing choice from our previous option. Now we're going to add another one. And this one's going to be create new account. And once again, we're going to do the exact same resource. So we're going to want to go to our screen choice fields, where this time the value equals our new field. Once we're done with that, that's pretty much done for this decision block. And what we're going to do next is to determine what the actual outcome is from these decisions. All right. And this is where things kind of start getting a little bit more fun, personally. On the next step, what I wanted to do is what happens when they want to create a new account, but I want to add a little bit to it. So I'm going to create a formula field to display the first and last name of the contact that we've already created. And to do that, what we're going to do is go over to our palette, and we're going to find formula. Oh, wait, resources. My apologies. So we're going to go and get formula here and double click that, and we'll bring up a new one. And we're going to just name this first and last name. And then down here, what we want to do is just select our two resources that we'd created previously from that very first screen on our input field. So we're going to have first name, and we want to concatenate that. So we want to add a space in between so that it looks nice and legible and readable for our users in the future. And we're going to add the last name after that. So this way, when it saves and we move on to the next screen, we'll actually be able to display the first and last name of the contact we created separated by a space, which just makes it nice to work with, and it gives us a little bit of data to use if we need it. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a second. Okay, so now that we've done that, we have to decide which path we're going to start working and building out first. I think for the sake of the argument, we're just going to start with new. Since we've got this fancy new formula field, we might as well start with a new record. So to do that, we're going to actually grab another screen here. And we're going to call this screen create new account. And then on this, we're going to add two fields. And we're also not going to show a header on this because of the fact that we're going to be building a more of a dynamic header. So technically there's 3 fields, but we only want 2 input fields, just to kind of be more clear. So we'll start with our display text that we want to show at the top of the screen here. And for that, what we're going to do is we're going to actually just kind of create a little label text here of our own. And we're going to call it new account label. And then in our resources here, what we want to do is do create new account for, and you'll remember we just created that formula field, so now we have this option here. And what's going to happen is this way it'll show up here for create new account for first space last name of our contact. And that's just in case we want to, maybe name our account after our contact. And also under that same mindset, we're going to be defaulting our next field to the same value. So we'll reuse that formula field in more than one place. So now we're going to go ahead and insert a text box. And that text box, we're just going to simply call account name. And for our default value, what we want to do is insert that formula field. And that way we can actually just name our account name right off the bat if we don't want to make any changes. The next step after that would be to add our pick list for rating. And to do that, we're just going to go to create a new pick list choice. And we're going to call it account rating. And we are going to pull this off of the account object. And the field in particular will be the rating field. I don't really care about sort order at this point because I'm going to let the database handle it for me, and I will click OK. Now we're going to give this a nice little field here, and we'll leave the default and click OK. And then we're going to connect this, and this is going to be our outcome for when we don't have, or when we want to create a brand new one. The next step is to actually create the account record that we're now building. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab another record create from our little data box where our DML statements are, and we're just going to call this one create new account, unless that's already been taken, which it has. And for this, we're going to want to create an account object. And just like we did with the contacts, we are going to want to map the fields that we are now populating. And we can get that from our screen input fields of account name, and rating. Now, once we create it, we are also going to want to create another variable here, so we have something to store the account ID in when it's created. And we're going to use this same variable later when selecting one, so that we can actually just have one location for both data sets to kind of access. So there we go. We'll go ahead and we'll click OK, and then OK again. And that's portion of that piece of the puzzle is done. Now the next step is just to go out and do the actual account already exists. And this one's going to involve a lookup field, which is kind of fun inside of flows. I guess that's subjective, but I really enjoy it. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to grab another screen and drop it over here. And we're going to call this one choose from the list of accounts. And for this one, we just simply need to add a single field. And that is once again going to be a drop-down list. And we're going to call it account records. We want to create a new one, and we want to do a dynamic record choice for this one. And what we're going to do is call this existing account display in our choice settings. And what we want to do is determine what field we actually want. So in this instance, what we want is the account object, and the field that we're going to be using is name. And for our choice label, we're going to make this name. And for the stored value, we want the ID field, because that's the only data that we're really going to be capturing here. So once we have done that, we are going to scroll down to our additional options. And for our field, we're going to once again choose account ID, or account as our object already. I apologize, but I do want the ID field still. And I'm going to store that to the variable that we created earlier, account ID. So now we're able to reuse that. We'll go ahead and we'll click OK. All right, that's done with that screen right there. And the next step is to assign the ID that we have. So we're going to go ahead and grab this assignment. And we're going to say assign to account ID. All right, now, once again, we're going to grab that variable, account ID equals, and we just want to grab whatever the value is from that input field in our dynamic record choices for existing account display. Okay, perfect. Connect those two up. Why wouldn't it let me connect them? Oh, that's why. That makes a whole bunch of sense. So we dragged this the wrong way previously. There we go. So if account exists, do that, and then we can go on to there. Now we're cooking with gas. All right. So once we've done that, we're going to want to go ahead and update the contact that we created before. So for that, we're just going to do a really quick record update, which doesn't actually involve a screen in this instance. And we're going to call it update contact. And for that, we're going to once again want to select our contact record. And we're going to say that the ID for our contact record that we're actually querying for needs to equal the ID of our contact record ID that we'd already previously created. And then after that, we're going to go to our account ID field, which is the field on the contact that's actually looking up to the account here. And we're going to want to assign that field the variable of account ID. All right. So now we just need to connect these two to that, so that whether or not they've created a new account or they've chosen an existing account from the pick list, both are going to update the contact following that. And then we just need a nice little warm fuzzy screen that says we've had a success, so our users are aware that they've finished. So we're just going to call this success message. And then from here, we're just going to drop a big display text here, do some fancy formatting, mainly just changing that and making it bold, but it's still fun. We're going to say success. And we'll center the text. We'll click O. Oh. Hey, look, it's saved. All right. So now that we've done that, we want to make sure that we choose our actual start screen, and we will save this. Create contact. And we do want to save this as a screen flow. We'll go ahead and we'll click OK. No, it doesn't. Pay no attention to the man behind the mask. All right, there we go. So now that'll save for us, and we can actually go ahead and run it and make sure that we're getting the information that we're looking for. So let's go ahead, Bryan James, and that's a good email. I'll click next, and let's choose a new account. Success. Awesome. So we'll finish that one, and then we're going to run it again one more time to make sure that we can actually choose an existing account. Awesome. Finish that. And then since both of those seem to have popped off, we'll go ahead and we've already saved this. So we'll close it. And we're going to activate it. All right. Now, once our flow is activated, we will have access to it on our home pages. So if I go over here to just my service homepage, just to make this quick and easy, and then I go up to my little gear icon, I can go into the edit page option. And then in my standard list of components here, I can just drag flow right up above here, above my recent records. And you can already see that we did create those two. And then we're just going to choose our create contacts flow. And we want it to be set to one column. We'll save this. We'll go back. And now we'll actually have our component right here on our main page so that whenever anybody comes to their home page, they can create contacts all day. And now my users have the ability to do their job without any interruption from triggers or validation rules hanging them up. Thanks, everybody.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Bryan. We got one person saying they're clapping, but you can't hear them right now. So thanks, Keith. All right, let's take a look at the Trailblazer community, see if we have any questions. Rakesh, are you looking at that right now? Or and if anyone has any questions they want to post in the GoToWebinar control panel, feel free to do that as well.
Let me reload this. Just a side note, you can make this component that he added, like flow component, make as a condition based. So if you want to display that component based on permission set or based on custom permission or based on user role, you can do that.
And yes, understandably, you can obviously just create the account or create a contact and then create the account from the contact. But our organization didn't want that.
Yep. Looks like no one has any doubt.
Right. What was the hardest part for you with Flow? Because I know you're coming at it from the developer side as opposed to somebody just coming in from the kind of point and click side.
Yeah.
I'd say overcomplicating it. The number one issue I have as a developer working inside of Flow is thinking too much about uh, the logic of the code and not so much about what is Flow going to just do for me out of the box. And so there was a lot of times when I was over engineering a lot of these screens, only to find out later that I didn't have to make it so complicated. And eventually I got to a point where it was really kind of streamlined for me, and it's really started clicking as to why this is such a viable option versus just automatically going in and creating a trigger. And even so, like prior to this, a lot of the times with the triggers, in order to avoid it, I would still do the invocable apex and attach that to a process builder. But this has even opened up a lot more ease of use, I think, for editing it and updating it later than, and plus the fact that there's more people in our organization who feel confident working in a flow versus working in code. So it really helps kind of bring both sides to the table so that they can work hand in hand together.
So how was your experience from moving from Apex developer to a Flow
It was
developer?
it really wasn't so bad. Luckily, there even though like I had a tendency to over-engineer, as I'd said previously, there's still a lot of stuff that you look at it and you have your own vocabulary for it, but the vocabulary is at least similar enough where a decision, you kind of look at a decision and I go, oh, okay, that's simply that's just an if-else statement, right?
Yeah.
Um, the record update is just as easy as calling update uh, and what's great about things like that is not actually having to type everything out, right? And save it only to find out, nope, spelled it wrong. Nope, that field doesn't exist. Nope, that's the incorrect object, right? Flow doesn't let you make those mistakes, which is really cool.
That's great. So what do you suggest? How if someone want to start with the visual workflow, what do you suggest which resources they can look at?
Well, Trailhead did wonders, obviously. I always feel like that's kind of a big go-to for any question as to how do I learn Salesforce. But really, I think the best thing to do to learn it is not when you have something to do. I think it's better to learn it when you don't and you just need to kind of putz around and you just want to, you know, drag the different items out onto the screen and say, how do I interact with a screen? What does a screen do for me? And put it out there, mark it as your start point, and run it in your debug or run it just using the run functionality and slowly kind of building on top of it and adding little bits just to understand how each individual component works in the flow versus saying, okay, I know what I need it to do at the very end, but I have no idea all the parts that are going to be involved with it. And it's a lot easier to understand those parts once you've used them, once you've taken a good deep dive look into them. A friend of mine also has a bunch of I think he's got like 5 or 6 books out that he's written on flow. He's a great author, and you might want to pick one of those up. I believe he just came out with a new one.
I think few months back.
So
What do you feel like is one of the reasons that you would choose to like say, okay, this shouldn't be in Flow, that I need to go code something like this? Like, do you have anything that you use as kind of your decision-making criteria, or do you find it just as you build, like whether or not you want to do it?
Well, I think at this point, it all comes down to how you want your users to interact with it. Flow is still going to be somewhat limited, at least from my perspective, on some of the interaction and some of the styling that you're going to be able to utilize with it, right? Like, I don't know if I would necessarily want to build a managed package off of a flow, but I would like to build a managed package out of code, right? Using the Lightning components and other things like that. Also, And that's mainly also comes down to kind of like the complexity of what you're trying to accomplish. I believe that as your flows get more and more complex, that it gets to a point where you're going to have diminishing returns as to the flow being the quicker solution over the code, if that makes any sense.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, very, very good. No one has any questions or anything. Oh no, yeah. Peter
We have
said
one
that.
question in the channel. So I think this gets back to kind of your inside of the flow. So you might want to navigate, or I don't know. But Keith asked, it looked like the account drop down showed all accounts, but I thought you used a contains filter. Was the
That
intention
might,
to
so
show
that
accounts that partially match the contact name?
that might have just been a mistake on my part learning how flows work, because I was simply following along with how I'd built it previously. And I guess at the time when I was building it, that's how it worked. And I kind of just like went with it because I didn't want anything to not work the way it was working in my practices. So that could just be a new to flow mistake of not understanding fully how that piece of it works. And I know where he's talking about. It's, I believe, coming up here. So let's create a new account lookup form. Yes, here it is. So if we're looking at this here, this is just simply what I was following. And at one point I'd set this up, and I guess like I didn't know at the time fully what it was doing. And since everything was working how I did it, I kind of kept it. And it was funny as I was working through it today, and I've learned so much since I actually originally built this flow, and I was working through these slides, but I still didn't feel confident changing it on the fly. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
So would you recommend not doing the contains in the future? Is that was probably not a good call, or just a misunderstanding of what the purpose of it was?
I think it, like, I use contains a good bit, but it depends on like what you're trying to get it to do. Because I think with, if you're doing a dynamic record choice, that's different from like if you're doing a record lookup of like how specific you want that to be. So um, contains would be where if you had something with like ink at the end, that would also show up. So that might be a good option. So you do include those outliers when you're dealing with a dynamic record choice.
Mm-hmm.
And we see Keith did post a question. It would make sense if it filtered by that criteria. So
It should work ideally.
I think it worked correctly because at the time that I'm using it, I'm not actually populating the account name, since the account
Yeah,
name is
yeah,
on. But I think like at that point, if I was to have backtracked by utilizing that previous value, would
yeah.
it have stored the value that I put in that account name input text? And then if I'd kind of decided maybe this already exists, I might go back over to choose existing account and it would filter by that. Now that would have been a undocumented feature, but I don't know if that's necessarily how it would have worked. But we can test it. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's choose a new count. And we'll say, I saw freighter as an option. So, oh, oops. All right, so now we've done that. We're going to go back and choose existing. Okay. So it put freighted up at the top, but actually, oh, maybe I think that was already there previously. That's why I saw it. All right, so yeah, I don't think that's doing what I thought it did originally. But that would be something I think you could probably do if you'd wanted it to.
yeah, definitely.
Hmm. No one else. Guys, you can ask any questions related to process automation, flow, Salesforce. So if you have any question, please post here or Salesforce Trailblazer community. So no one is asking.
I guess I'm not fully surprised considering it was a very basic flow, and I would assume that most people understood how most of this worked prior to the call.
Not like that, because there are people I usually come to me, they don't understand the basic, but they created the flow. So I think we have mix of participants who understand the flow basics. Some of them are don't understand. So I think that's a good. Jimmy. So thank you so much for
Thank you
everyone
so much, Brian.
who attended, and thanks, Brian. It was very
Thank you
very
so
very
much.
good, very very good.
I really appreciate it.
We also appreciate all your hard work that you are putting behind the scene to make it happen.
Oh, no, I couldn't have done it without everybody else's influences. So I really appreciate everybody else who's been participating in this and giving me ideas on how to go about presenting.
Thanks everyone. Happy weekend, and talk to you next automation hour. So one